Thanksgiving dinner was supposed to last 4 hours. Instead, it destroyed my entire family in less than 4 minutes. My younger sister grabbed my laptop in front of 20 relatives, expecting to embarrass me for working what she called a sad little antique job, and accidentally exposed that I was secretly worth over $12 million. The worst part? My parents didn't ask how I did it. They didn't say they were proud. My mother looked me dead in the eyes and screamed, "Your sister deserves that money more than you." Before we get into this story, do me a quick favor and subscribe to the channel. These revenge stories take a massive amount of time to write and produce, and your support genuinely helps keep the channel alive. And trust me, after you hear what happened at that Thanksgiving table, you're going to want more stories exactly like this one. Now let's get into it. I learned very young that love inside my family was conditional. Not earned. Not shared. Allocated. And almost all of it went to my younger sister Rachel. Before Rachel was born, life was normal. Not perfect. Not especially warm. But normal. I was an only child until I was 8 years old. We lived in a modest suburban neighborhood outside Detroit. My dad worked long shifts managing a warehouse distribution center, and my mother taught part-time at a preschool. I remember pancake Saturdays. I remember my father teaching me how to bait a fishing hook at Lake St. Clair. I remember my mother helping me practice spelling words at the kitchen table while spaghetti sauce simmered on the stove. Nothing magical, but enough to make a child feel safe. Then Rachel was born 2 months premature. And overnight, my entire existence changed. I still remember Aunt Kelly shaking me awake at 2 in the morning. "Sweetheart, pack a bag," she whispered gently. "Mommy's in the hospital." There was fear in her voice. The kind kids instantly recognize even if they don't understand it. The next several weeks blurred together into hospital waiting rooms, hushed conversations, and exhausted relatives drinking bad coffee under fluorescent lights. Rachel was tiny. Painfully tiny. I saw her once through the NICU glass. Tubes everywhere. Machines beeping steadily beside her fragile body. And even at 8 years old, I understood something terrifying. Everyone was looking at her. No one was looking at me anymore. At first, I tried not to resent it. How could I? She was a baby fighting to survive. But survival slowly became obsession inside our house. When Rachel finally came home, our entire world transformed into a medical quarantine zone. My mother sanitized every surface constantly. There were hand sanitizer bottles in every room. Air purifiers humming day and night. Bleach. Always bleach. Even now, that chemical smell still twists something inside my stomach. And whenever I got even slightly sick, I disappeared. A sneeze. Sent to Grandma Marie's. A cough. Dropped off at Aunt Kelly's. One fever. I spent 10 straight days away from home while my parents protected Rachel. At first, it felt exciting. Grandma Marie baked cookies and let me stay up late reading Nancy Drew books under thick handmade quilts. But eventually children notice patterns. And once you notice them, you can't unsee them. I realized I wasn't being sent away because people loved me. I was being removed because I was considered dangerous. An inconvenience. A threat to the real child that mattered. That realization changes something in a kid. You stop asking for attention eventually. Because rejection hurts worse every single time. Still, I tried. God, I tried so hard. I got perfect grades. Nothing. I won first place at the regional science fair with a renewable energy project I spent 3 months building. My father barely looked up from the television. "That's nice, kiddo," he muttered. "Can you move it to the garage?" Rachel's allergies are acting up. Rachel was allergic to everything. Dust. Perfume. Dogs. Pollen. My lavender air freshener. At some point, her allergies became less medical and more strategic. Because Rachel figured something out very early. Weakness got rewarded in our family. By age 7, she knew exactly how to manipulate my parents. Headache before school. Stay home. Tired before chores? I'd do them instead. Nervous about a test? Mom would literally email teachers asking for extensions. And every single accommodation came with the same explanation. Rachel's had such a difficult start in life. Meanwhile, I became the independent one. You know what that really means? Neglected. The breaking point came when I was 12. For months, I practiced piano every evening for the school talent show. Bridge over troubled water. I practiced until my fingers cramped. Until my wrists hurt. Until I could play it blindfolded. For one stupid childish reason. I wanted my parents to finally look at me with pride. The night of the performance, Rachel developed a temperature of 99.1. Not 100. Not actually sick. 99.1. My parents skipped the show. Both of them. I played anyway. And I still remember scanning the audience under those bright auditorium lights. Every seat looked blurry except the 2 empty ones I kept searching for. I played perfectly. Won second place. Went home carrying my certificate alone. 2 weeks later, our entire extended family attended Rachel's 12-minute flute recital where she butchered hot cross buns. My mother cried afterward like Rachel had performed at Carnegie Hall. That was the moment resentment stopped feeling temporary. It became permanent. And the worst part? They rewrote reality constantly to justify it. Sarah's mature. Sarah understands. Sarah doesn't need as much attention. No. Sarah. But eventually neglected kids stop begging. They adapt instead. I retreated into books. Art history. Antiques. Vintage fashion. Anything old enough to carry stories inside it. Grandma Marie unknowingly saved me during those years. She had this massive collection of vintage jewelry stored in velvet-lined boxes beneath her bed. Most of it costume jewelry. Nothing outrageously valuable. But every piece had history. And unlike my parents, Grandma let me talk. Really talk. We'd spend hours cataloging brooches and bracelets at her dining room table while sunlight spilled through lace curtains. She'd hand me pieces carefully and ask, "What do you notice?" That question changed my life. Nobody else cared what I noticed. Grandma did. And somewhere in those quiet afternoons, I found the first thing that truly belonged to me. Not Rachel. Not the family. Mine. By high school, I'd become frighteningly self-sufficient. My bedroom looked like a military operations center. Color-coded notes. Organized binders. Detailed schedules. I joined debate team. National Honor Society. Student newspaper. Anything that kept me away from home. And debate team changed me forever. Because I learned something powerful there. Emotion matters. But preparation wins wars. While Rachel built her social kingdom in middle school, I built escape plans. I worked weekends at Carson's Diner. Carol, the owner, became more of a parent than my actual parents ever were. She remembered my birthday, my favorite pie, the fact I hated mushrooms. Tiny things. Tiny things neglected kids remember forever. One night while wiping tables, Carol looked at me and said, "You know why you're gonna make it someday, honey?" I shrugged. "Because nobody handed you anything. Kids like you either break or become unstoppable." At 16, I didn't believe her. At 38, I think about that sentence almost every day. Junior year, I got a perfect SAT score. Perfect. 1600. Less than 1% of students in the country accomplish that. I stared at the computer screen at school for almost 20 minutes because I genuinely thought there had been some kind of technical glitch. My guidance counselor hugged me. Actually hugged me. I rushed home feeling lighter than air. For once. I thought maybe this achievement would be big enough. Maybe impossible to ignore. Mom was helping Rachel with homework when I walked into the kitchen. "Mom," I said breathlessly, "I got my SAT results." "Oh, I got a perfect score." She barely looked up. "That's wonderful, honey. But can you keep your voice down?" Rachel's concentrating. Rachel rolled her eyes dramatically. "Some of us actually have to study." Mom immediately rubbed Rachel's shoulder. "It's okay, sweetie. You're just a different kind of learner." I stood there holding the paper so tightly it crumpled in my hand. Nobody asked to see it. Nobody hugged me. Nobody even smiled. 3 days later Rachel got a C+ on an English quiz and my mother taped it to the refrigerator with "So proud of you" magnet. I wish I were exaggerating. College applications became my secret rebellion. I applied to 15 schools without telling anyone. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Michigan, Northwestern. I filled out financial aid paperwork alone because my parents were too busy. Mr. Chen, my guidance counselor, stayed after school multiple evenings helping me complete FAFSA forms. Acceptance letters started arriving one by one. Every single one came with scholarship offers. I hid them under my mattress. Because deep down, I already knew. If Rachel realized I had opportunities she didn't, somehow the situation would become about her suffering instead. And I was right. The day my full scholarship offer from the University of Michigan arrived, Rachel made junior varsity cheerleading. Guess which event got celebrated with a family dinner at Olive Garden? Hint. I ate microwave mac and cheese alone in my room while listening to them sing congratulations downstairs. The night I officially committed to Michigan, my father frowned across the dinner table. "That's awfully far," he said. Mom sighed dramatically. "What if Rachel needs you?" Rachel actually clapped excitedly. "Can I have your room?" That summer before college, I worked double shifts at Carson's nearly every day. I saved every dollar. Because deep down, I understood something terrifying. If I failed, I had nowhere to fall back to. No safety net. No family rescue. Failure for me meant disappearing completely. Move-in day came in late August. My parents didn't attend. Rachel had a cheer competition. Aunt Kelly drove me instead. Halfway there, she handed me an envelope. "Your grandmother wanted you to have this. $500. Saved from Grandma Marie's Social Security checks." I nearly cried right there in the passenger seat. Not because of the money. Because someone believed I mattered enough to prepare for my future. That first night inside my dorm room, surrounded by cheap furniture and unpacked boxes, I made myself a promise. One day, I would build a life so extraordinary that nobody could ever ignore me again. And for the first time in years, I truly believed I might. College felt like stepping onto another planet. Not because it was glamorous. It wasn't. I lived on instant ramen, cafeteria coffee, and 4 hours of sleep. But for the first time in my entire life, nobody treated me like background noise. At Michigan, people actually listened when I spoke. Professors remembered my name. Classmates asked for my opinion. And every tiny moment of acknowledgement felt almost suspicious at first, like I was waiting for someone to take it away. Trauma does that to you. When you spend your childhood fighting for scraps of attention, basic kindness starts feeling unnatural. Freshman year, I developed this horrible habit of apologizing constantly. Sorry for asking questions. Sorry for taking up space. Sorry for existing too loudly. One afternoon after class, a professor finally stopped me. "Sarah," he said gently, "why are you apologizing for participating?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because I genuinely didn't know. That realization haunted me for weeks. I buried myself in work instead. Art history. Business electives. Luxury goods markets. Anything connected to antiques, authentication, or historical valuation. While other students spent weekends partying, I haunted estate sales and second-hand bookstores. I love objects with history. Loved imagining the lives attached to them. Who wore this bracelet? Who hid this necklace away for decades? Who passed this ring down through generations? Objects tell the truth even when people don't. And I trusted objects more than people. Back home, nothing changed. Phone calls with my family always revolved around Rachel. Rachel's classes. Rachel's drama. Rachel's anxiety. Rachel's social life. Sometimes my mother would talk for 40 minutes straight without asking me a single question. Then right before hanging up she'd say, "Oh, and how are your little classes going?" Little classes. At one of the best universities in the country. I stopped trying after a while. Stopped volunteering information. Stopped expecting validation. And honestly, that emotional distance became freeing. I graduated summa cum laude at 22. Highest honors. Top of my department. My parents didn't come. Rachel was transferring colleges again and needed support during the transition. I walked across the graduation stage scanning the audience anyway. Part of me still hoped. That's the ugly truth nobody talks about with emotionally neglected children. A piece of you keeps hoping forever. Even when logic says stop. Even when reality screams stop. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a high-end auction house in Detroit. Everett and Phillips. At least that's what I'll call it here. If you work in luxury auctions, you probably know the real name already. The building itself looked intimidating. Marble floors. Dark wood walls. Security guards in tailored suits. Clients who smelled like old money and expensive perfume. I was terrified my first day. Not because I wasn't qualified. Because I still carried this deep-rooted belief that eventually someone would realize I didn't belong anywhere important. Imposter syndrome becomes second nature when you grow up invisible. My starting job was painfully unglamorous. Estate inventory assistant. Basically, rich people died and I catalogued their belongings. China sets. Silverware. Vintage furniture. Dusty paintings nobody wanted. Most employees treated jewelry authentication like secondary work. Tedious. Technical. Easy to outsource. But to me, it felt like magic. Every gemstone carried clues. Every clasp. Every hallmark. Every tiny manufacturing detail whispered history if you knew how to listen. And thanks to Grandma Marie, I knew how to listen. The breakthrough happened 7 months into the job. The Kingston estate. Huge property. Old Detroit money. The kind of house where every room smelled faintly like cigars and date roses. We spent days cataloging jewelry from Mrs. Kingston's collection. Most employees dismissed it immediately as costume pieces. Cheap replicas. Nothing special. Then I picked up a brooch. Small Art Deco design. Subtle. Elegant. And immediately something felt wrong. Or rather, too right. The weight was heavier than costume jewelry should have been. The clasp mechanism was unusually intricate. The craftsmanship felt deliberate. I skipped lunch that day researching maker marks. Skipped dinner too. I stayed late using auction databases until security practically kicked me out. For 2 straight weeks, I obsessed over that brooch. I studied archived Cartier signatures from the 1920s. Compared metal compositions. Examined microscopic engravings. I barely slept. And finally, terrified out of my mind, I approached my boss. Mr. Harrison. Tall. Sharp. Intimidating in that calm wealthy person way. I walked into his office clutching a folder so tightly my palms sweated through the paper. Sir, I said carefully, I think we misidentified an item from the Kingston collection. He barely glanced up. Sarah, the jewelry team already processed those. I know, but we don't have time to recheck every costume piece. My throat tightened. Every childhood instinct screamed at me to back down. Stay quiet. Don't inconvenience anyone. But debate team had taught me something important. Facts don't care about intimidation. So I opened the folder anyway. I laid out side-by-side comparisons. Historical documentation. Manufacturing records. Archive authentication references. And finally, Mr. Harrison looked up. Really looked up. The room went silent while he studied the paperwork. Then he slowly picked up the brooch himself. Where, he asked quietly, did you learn all this? I swallowed hard. My grandmother collected vintage jewelry. 3 weeks later that costume piece sold at auction for $47,000. Turns out it was part of a rare European Art Deco collection thought partially lost after World War II. The entire office changed after that. Not overnight. But subtly. People who barely acknowledged me before suddenly asked questions. Coworkers started bringing difficult pieces to my desk. Mr. Harrison began involving me in higher-level authentication work. And for the first time in my life, being observant became valuable instead of inconvenient. I became addicted to learning. Gemology courses. Historical jewelry databases. Auction market trends. Authentication seminars. I spent almost every paycheck on education. My apartment slowly transformed into something between a research library and a conspiracy theorist bunker. Sticky notes everywhere. Reference books stacked in dangerous towers. Printouts of antique hallmarks covering entire walls. I loved it. Because every hour I invested in myself felt like reclaiming something stolen during childhood. Confidence. Identity. Purpose. Meanwhile, Sunday dinners at my parents' house remain emotionally exhausting theater productions. Nothing I accomplished mattered there. One evening, I mentioned authenticating a rare Tiffany piece. Mom nodded vaguely. Rachel interrupted immediately. "Oh my God, speaking of jewelry, look at this bracelet I got at the mall." Everyone spent 20 minutes admiring her charm bracelet while my career achievement evaporated into silence. But something inside me had changed by then. Their dismissal no longer destroyed me. Because outside that house, I was becoming someone. The Rothschild collection changed everything. 2 years into my career, Everett and Phillips landed a massive estate account from an old-money family with international holdings. The entire luxury auction world buzzed about it. We spent weeks cataloging the jewelry alone. One evening around 9 p.m., I noticed a neglected Art Nouveau necklace buried inside a tray of supposedly low-value items. Again. That feeling. That instinct. I took it home for further research. 3 days later, after surviving almost entirely on coffee and adrenaline, I discovered the truth. The necklace belonged to a private French collection believed destroyed during World War II. It wasn't just valuable. It was historically significant. The auction price exploded past $200,000. When the hammer finally dropped at $238,000, the room erupted. Mr. Harrison called me into his office afterward. I thought I was getting promoted. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and studied me quietly. "You're wasting your talent here." I blinked. "I'm sorry. You should build your own authentication business." I actually laughed. Out loud. Me? Start a business? With what money? What confidence? What safety net? But the idea infected my brain immediately. For weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Private collectors had already started requesting me specifically. Dealers trusted my evaluations. I had contacts, reputation, skill. Everything except courage. And eventually, pain becomes stronger than fear. Because I realized something horrifying one night while sitting alone in my tiny apartment surrounded by jewelry references. If I stayed afraid forever, I'd spend my whole life making other people rich while still seeing myself the way my family saw me. Small. Replaceable. Forgettable. I couldn't survive that realization. So I did something reckless. I emptied my savings account. Took a loan against my car. Rented the cheapest office space I could find. Technically, it wasn't even an office. It was a storage room above a Chinese restaurant. The entire hallway permanently smelled like fried garlic and kung pao chicken. The Wi-Fi only worked near one specific window. And my furniture consisted of a folding table from Goodwill, a desk lamp with exposed wiring, and a chair I literally found beside a dumpster. I cleaned it thoroughly first. Probably. The first 6 months terrified me. Every morning I woke up nauseous. Every night I calculated bills until my chest hurt. Some days the phone never rang. Other days I'd stare at my bank balance so long my vision blurred. Failure felt inches away constantly. But something strange happens when you spend your entire childhood emotionally abandoned. You become weirdly resilient. Because rock bottom doesn't scare you as much anymore. You've lived there before. Slowly. Painfully. Clients started coming. Small antique dealers first. Then estate lawyers. Then private collectors. My prices were lower than established firms, but my attention to detail became my reputation. And reputation spreads fast in luxury markets. One collector changed everything. An older woman inherited a massive Victorian brooch collection and wanted authentication before auction. I spent 2 straight weeks analyzing every piece. Photographing hallmarks. Documenting provenance. Researching restoration patterns. And buried inside the collection, I found 2 pieces previously dismissed as replicas. They were authentic. Rare. Worth far more than anyone realized. When the collection sold, my commission alone totaled $86,000. I remember staring at the payment confirmation on my laptop while sitting on my apartment floor. $86,000. More money than my parents made in years. My hands shook so badly I dropped the phone. Then I cried. Not elegant movie tears either. Ugly crying. Because for the first time, I wasn't surviving anymore. I was winning. The business exploded after that. Word spread quietly through collector circles. She finds things other experts miss. That became my reputation. Lost pieces. Misidentified heirlooms. Historical jewels hidden in plain sight. I built my entire company around meticulous authentication. And eventually, the impossible started happening. Real wealth. Not fantasy wealth. Not Instagram wealth. Actual wealth. The kind that requires accountants, lawyers, investment advisors. I hired my first employee during year 2. Jenny. Fresh gemology graduate. Quiet. Brilliant. Undervalued. She reminded me painfully of myself. Today she runs our authentication division and honestly deserves half the company. By year 5, we had offices in Detroit, Chicago, and New York. I flew constantly. Met collectors from Dubai, Paris, Hong Kong. Authenticated pieces worth millions. Some commissions alone reached 6 figures. And somehow, my family still thought I worked in a cute little antique shop. Part of that was intentional. At first I kept quiet because explaining success to them felt exhausting. Then eventually, it became fascinating. Like conducting a psychological experiment. I sit at Sunday dinners wearing understated luxury pieces worth more than their mortgage payments while listening to Rachel explain marketing internships like she was CEO of Google. Nobody noticed. Ever. Rachel once spent 20 straight minutes bragging about a $200 designer watch. Meanwhile I was wearing a vintage Patek Philippe worth more than her car. No reaction. No curiosity. Nothing. Because they never truly looked at me. And honestly, that realization hurt more than the favoritism itself. One Sunday after closing a 7-figure authentication deal, I drove directly to my parents' house still wearing a $3,000 cashmere sweater. Mom frowned immediately. "Sarah honey, your clothes are looking worn lately." I nearly laughed into my wine glass. Rachel smirked. Well, if she got a real job instead of playing with old jewelry. Dad nodded absent-mindedly. Not everybody can be successful like your sister. I sat there silently while mentally reviewing a transaction larger than Rachel's yearly salary. The absurdity became almost funny by then. Almost. Then came the anonymous money transfers. Aunt Kelly mentioned during a phone call that my parents were struggling financially. Rachel's student loans. Medical debt. Mortgage stress. Apparently retirement savings were thin. Despite everything, I couldn't let them lose the house. Trauma bonds are complicated. So I arranged anonymous monthly transfers. $5,000 at first. Then $7,000 later. Every month. Quietly. No recognition. No explanation. And the irony. My family pitied me while spending my money. Mom constantly made comments like, "Sarah sacrifices so much to help this family." Rachel started showing up with luxury handbags and expensive vacations shortly afterward. I recognized authentic Gucci instantly. She thought nobody else did. At dinner she'd brag casually. "Oh, this old thing. Outlet find." "Sure, Rachel. Outlet find. With my money." But I stayed quiet. Because somewhere deep down, a tiny wounded part of me still hoped that eventually they'd realize my value on their own. Without proof. Without money. Without public success. I wanted them to love me first. And that was my biggest mistake. Success is a strange thing when you grew up emotionally starving. Most people imagine wealth feels loud. Victorious. Like champagne explosions and flashy celebrations. For me, it felt quiet. Careful. Almost secretive. Because when you spend your entire childhood being taught you're less important than everyone else, a part of you never fully adjusts to success. Even after the company exploded. Even after the interviews. Even after industry magazines started calling me one of the sharpest authentication specialists in the luxury market. A piece of me still expected someone to tap me on the shoulder and say, "Sorry. There's been a mistake." So instead of becoming flashy, I became controlled. Disciplined. Invisible in a different way. By 35, my company had become one of the largest private jewelry authentication firms in the Midwest. We worked with collectors, estate attorneys, museums, insurance companies, and auction houses around the world. Our reputation rested on one thing: discretion. We found lost history. Quietly. And wealthy people love quiet professionals. Especially wealthy people hiding assets from ex-spouses, governments, or greedy relatives. I learned very quickly that rich people will pay absurd amounts of money for privacy. And I became exceptionally good at giving it to them. My days became surreal. One morning I'd be authenticating a diamond necklace in Manhattan worth more than my childhood neighborhood combined. The next morning I'd be on a secure video call with a collector in Dubai discussing 18th century emerald settings. Then Sunday would come. And I'd sit in my parents' cramped dining room listening to Rachel complain about office politics at her entry-level marketing job. It felt like living two entirely separate lives. Corporate Sarah. And family Sarah. One woman got flown across the country for consultations. The other got asked whether she'd considered going back to school for something more practical. The disconnect became almost comical. One Sunday, Rachel spent 30 minutes bragging about organizing a small social media campaign at work. Mom looked at her like she'd cured cancer. "You're just so driven, sweetheart." Then she turned toward me. "How's the antique store?" Antique store. I own a company generating millions annually. And still. Antique store. I smiled politely. Busy. That was always my answer. Busy. Because anything more complicated required emotional energy they'd never earned access to. The truth is, keeping the secret became addictive. I liked watching how people treated me when they believed I had nothing. It taught me everything about them. Especially Rachel. Rachel didn't just enjoy being the favorite. She needed it. It had become her entire identity. She loved talking down to me. Loved giving fake advice. Loved acting like she was somehow more successful despite living mostly off my parents and eventually my anonymous money transfers. One Christmas she actually pulled me aside privately and said, "You know, Sarah, if you network more and dress better, maybe you could finally move up in your little jewelry job." I almost blacked out trying not to laugh. That same week I'd finalized a deal involving a private royal collection worth 8 figures. Meanwhile Rachel was giving me career advice because her boss trusted her with PowerPoint presentations. The irony was unbelievable. But underneath the humor, there was still pain. Because no matter how successful I became, family rejection still cut deep in quiet moments. Especially late at night. There's this myth that money heals childhood wounds. It doesn't. It just buys better coping mechanisms. I still had panic attacks sometimes. Still overworked myself compulsively. Still struggled accepting compliments. Still instinctively minimized my own achievements in conversations. My therapist later explained something that shattered me emotionally. She said, "Sarah, you learned very young that being impressive didn't guarantee love. So now achievement feels necessary for survival instead of joy." I thought about that sentence for weeks. Because she was right. Every accomplishment felt temporary. Like I constantly needed to earn the right to exist. And maybe that's why I worked so obsessively. Because stopping meant feeling things. And feeling things meant remembering childhood. So I kept building. More clients. More offices. More success. By 36, my personal net worth crossed 8 figures. I remember staring at the financial reports in stunned silence. $12 million. 12 million. The little girl who got sent away for sneezing now had enough money to buy the entire street she grew up on. And nobody in my family knew. Sometimes I'd sit alone in my kitchen late at night holding a glass of wine thinking about how absurd life was. My mother still believed I struggled financially. Still made passive-aggressive comments about my modest career. Still occasionally offered me leftovers to help me save money. Meanwhile my watch alone could have covered her mortgage. But the secrecy wasn't entirely strategic. Part of me genuinely feared what would happen if they found out. Because deep down, I knew their love had always been transactional. Rachel especially became increasingly entitled as she got older. She bounced between jobs constantly. Every workplace drama somehow became someone else's fault. Her boss was jealous. Co-workers were toxic. The company didn't recognize her talent. Same story every time. And my parents defended her endlessly. She's sensitive. She's creative. She deserves better opportunities. Meanwhile Rachel spent money like a teenager with a stolen credit card. Luxury bags. Trips. Cosmetic procedures. Designer shoes. All funded partially by the anonymous money I'd been sending monthly. That realization started poisoning me slowly. Because every transfer felt less like helping family. And more like financing the continued worship of my sister. Then came the MBA situation. And honestly, that's probably where something inside me finally started breaking. One Sunday dinner, Rachel announced dramatically that she wanted to pursue an MBA. Not at a state school. Of course not. A prestigious private university. Expensive enough to make normal people dizzy. Mom immediately looked emotional. Dad started talking about sacrifices. Rachel sat there basking in attention like a Disney princess accepting a crown. Then my mother turned toward me. We just don't know how we're going to afford it. I stared at her carefully. Maybe Rachel could consider less expensive programs? There are excellent state schools. Mom cut me off instantly. You don't understand. Rachel needs to maintain certain standards. Standards. I nearly laughed out loud. This woman genuinely believed my sister deserved elite luxury opportunities simply for existing. Meanwhile, I'd earned every scholarship, every promotion, every dollar alone. That night, against my better judgment, I increased the anonymous transfers again. 7,000 monthly. Because despite everything, I still wanted to save them. That's the ugly thing about emotionally neglected kids. We spend our lives trying to earn love from people who already decided not to give it. A month later, I received an invitation to guest lecture at the exact same business school Rachel desperately wanted to attend. The dean personally invited me to speak about luxury authentication markets and entrepreneurship. I remember sitting in my office staring at the email while laughing softly to myself. Rachel thought I worked in a glorified pawn shop. Meanwhile, universities were inviting me to teach executives. The contrast felt almost cinematic. I declined Sunday dinner that week because of the lecture. Mom sounded irritated. You're missing family dinner for work again? Yes. Well, try not to exhaust yourself at the antique store. I hung up before I said something cruel. The lecture went brilliantly. Standing in front of hundreds of graduate students discussing business growth, market trust, and luxury authentication should have felt triumphant. Instead, halfway through the presentation, I suddenly imagined my parents sitting in the audience. And I knew exactly what they'd see. Not success. Not intelligence. Not discipline. They'd still just see the other daughter. The backup child. The inconvenient one. That realization hollowed me out in ways I can't fully explain. Afterward, I went back to my hotel room and cried silently in the bathroom for almost an hour. Not because I was unhappy. Because I finally understood something devastating. Nothing I ever achieved would change how they saw me. Nothing. Not degrees. Not money. Not respect. Not success. People who commit emotionally to misunderstanding you will protect that misunderstanding forever. And once I accepted that, something inside me finally stopped begging. The final months before Thanksgiving felt tense in ways I couldn't fully describe. Rachel's comments became sharper. My mother's financial hints became more aggressive. Dad started casually mentioning retirement more often. It felt like they sensed money nearby somehow, even without proof. Like sharks smelling blood underwater. Then came the phone call. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. Mom was crying dramatically about her herniated disc. How am I supposed to cook for 20 people like this? I closed my office door quietly while listening. Part of me already knew what was happening. This wasn't really about Thanksgiving. It was another performance. Another opportunity for Rachel to become the center of family sympathy. And suddenly, I was exhausted. Bone deep exhausted. Exhausted from pretending. Exhausted from minimizing myself. Exhausted from funding people who barely acknowledged my humanity. So before I could overthink it, I said, I'll handle Thanksgiving this year. Silence. Then immediate concern. Oh honey, catering is expensive. I almost smiled. Don't worry about it. You're not taking loans, are you? Loans. I looked around my office. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Custom security systems. Historical jewelry references worth small fortunes. Employees depending on me. Millions sitting in investment accounts. And my mother still imagined me barely surviving financially. The absurdity finally stopped hurting. It just became sad. I've been saving, I said calmly. Technically true. I hired one of the premium catering companies we use for corporate luxury events. Not flashy food. Elegant food. The kind that makes people pause after the first bite. The total bill cost more than my parents believe I earned in 2 months. And honestly, for the first time in years, I wanted them impressed. Not by my money. By me. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and grey. I remember standing in my kitchen staring at my reflection while fastening a pair of diamond earrings subtle enough not to attract attention. I chose my outfit carefully. Soft cream cashmere sweater. Dark jeans. Minimal makeup. Controlled. Always controlled. My laptop came with me because a major Hong Kong auction was happening that evening involving a rare Art Nouveau necklace. One of my private clients wanted immediate authentication support if bidding succeeded. Business never really stopped anymore. When I arrived at my parents' house, chaos was already unfolding. Football on television. Children screaming upstairs. Relatives drinking wine too early. Rachel complaining about traffic. The usual. The catering team arrived precisely on schedule. And immediately, the atmosphere changed. You could feel people noticing the quality. The presentation. The smell. Mom became visibly anxious. Oh Sarah, this must have cost a fortune. It's handled. Rachel immediately scoffed. Store-bought stuffing? Seriously? This from a woman who once burned instant rice. Dinner actually went surprisingly well at first. The food distracted everyone. Even Rachel stopped criticizing things after tasting the maple-glazed Brussels sprouts. For a brief moment, I almost relaxed. Which was my mistake. Because peace inside toxic families is usually temporary. And eventually, the mask always slips. About halfway through dessert, my phone buzzed with updates from the Hong Kong auction. Bidding was escalating rapidly. I excused myself quietly and went upstairs to my old bedroom. The room looked frozen in time. Same faded wallpaper. Same bookshelf. Same loneliness. I opened my laptop and joined the live authentication feed. Numbers climbed quickly across the screen. Hundreds of thousands. Then over 1 million. I became completely focused. And downstairs, Rachel was getting curious. That woman could smell attention shifting away from her like smoke in the air. A few minutes later, my bedroom door opened without knocking. Of course. Rachel leaned against the doorway dramatically. There you are, she said. Mom thinks you're hiding. I'm working. She walked closer. Then she noticed my laptop screen. And smiled. That smile still makes my stomach turn when I remember it. Because I recognized it instantly. Predatory excitement. Rachel genuinely thought she'd caught me doing something embarrassing. Maybe online shopping. Maybe fake business work. Maybe some pathetic fantasy life. She saw an opportunity to humiliate me publicly. And she took it. Without hesitation. She grabbed my laptop before I could react. What are you doing? I snapped, standing up. Oh my God, she laughed, relax. Then she walked downstairs carrying my entire life in her hands. And somehow, I already knew disaster was seconds away. There are moments in life where time slows down so violently that every second feels physical. This was one of them. I followed Rachel downstairs with my heart hammering against my ribs so hard it actually hurt. My stomach twisted. Not because I was ashamed. Because I suddenly realized my entire family was about to see me clearly for the first time in their lives. And I didn't know what that would unleash. Rachel strutted into the dining room grinning like a child carrying gossip. 20 relatives turned toward her instantly. The chandelier lights reflected off half-empty wine glasses while folks paused mid-air. Everyone was relaxed. Laughing. Comfortable. Nobody understood the granite Rachel was carrying. "Oh my God," she announced loudly, "you guys have to see what Sarah's doing upstairs instead of spending time with the family." A few relatives chuckled. I stopped 3 steps behind her. "Rachel," I said carefully, "give me the laptop." But she ignored me completely. Because humiliation was her favorite currency. And for once, she thought she finally had enough to buy herself a victory over me. She spun the screen toward the table dramatically. "I think our little antique shop worker has been pretending to be way more important than she really." Then she stopped talking. The entire room stopped breathing. Silence hit so hard it almost sounded loud. Because my screen was still open. Financial dashboards. Authentication contracts. Investment reports. Quarterly revenue statements. Wire transfers. Account balances. Millions. Visible to everyone. One number sat directly in the center of the screen. $12,482,331.18. Rachel stared at it blankly. Her face literally lost color. At first she looked confused. Then horrified. Then something uglier. Something feral. Rachel whispered weakly. "She's rich." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the children upstairs somehow sounded quieter. Mom laughed suddenly. Not happy laughter. Nervous laughter. "Oh, don't be ridiculous," she said. "Sarah works in antiques." I walked forward slowly and took the laptop gently from Rachel's frozen hands. And honestly, a strange calm came over me. Because after years of hiding, I was too tired to lie anymore. "Yes," I said quietly. "I'm wealthy." The room exploded. Questions hit me from every direction. What? How? Since when? Is this real? Dad stood so quickly his chest scraped violently across the hardwood floor. "You have $12 million? Approximately." Mom's face turned bright red. "You've been lying to us." And there it was. Not confusion. Not concern. Not pride. Accusation. I looked around the room slowly. Every relative staring at me like I'd transformed into another species. "You never asked," I said softly. That sentence made something snap inside my mother. "You let us struggle while sitting on millions?" Her voice cracked into a scream by the end. The entire table went silent again. And suddenly, years of buried anger started rising inside me so fast I felt dizzy. "Struggle," I repeated carefully. "I've been sending you $7,000 every month." Mom froze. Dad blinked hard. Rachel's mouth literally fell open. "What? You thought Aunt Kelly was helping?" I laughed once. "No. That was me." The room shifted instantly. You could physically feel the atmosphere changing. People started doing math in their heads. 7,000 monthly. 4 years. My aunt slowly lowered her wine glass like she finally understood something huge. Rachel recovered first. Of course she did. She always recovered fast when attention was slipping away. You had all this money, she snapped, and you hid it from your own family. Something in her voice broke me. Not because it hurt. Because it revealed everything. Even now. This was still about what they believed they deserved from me. Not one person had said, "We're proud of you." Not one. I looked directly at my mother. "Do you know how many times you called my business that little antique shop?" Mom waved her hand dismissively. "That's not the point." "No," I said quietly. "It is the point." Dad stepped forward. "We raised you." I laughed. Actually laughed. Not kindly. Not softly. A bitter, exhausted laugh that surprised even me. Raised me. Every hate turned toward me. And years of pain finally erupted. You sent me away every time I got sick because Rachel mattered more. Mom's expression hardened instantly. That is not fair. You missed every award ceremony. Every competition. Every achievement. You were independent, she snapped. "No," I shouted suddenly. "I was neglected." The room went dead silent. I could hear the catering staff awkwardly moving dishes in the kitchen. My breathing sounded too loud. Rachel crossed her arms immediately. Classic defense posture. "You're being dramatic." I turned toward her so fast she actually flinched. "Dramatic?" I repeated. "You built your entire personality around being the favorite." Rachel scoffed. "Oh please. You think I didn't notice?" My voice shook now. Every fake illness. Every crisis. Every performance, every time attention moved away from you. Mom stood up abruptly. "How dare you attack your sister?" And there it was again. Instant protection. Instant defense. Same pattern. Same family. Even now. I stared at my mother and suddenly saw her clearly for the first time. Not as someone cruel exactly. Something worse. Weak. She needed Rachel dependent on her. Needed to feel necessary. And I threatened that dynamic by surviving alone. "You know what the funniest part is?" I asked quietly. Nobody answered. "I spent my whole life trying to make you proud." My throat tightened painfully. I got perfect grades. Scholarships. Built a company from nothing. Sent you money anonymously. Protected your dignity. Mom opened her mouth. I cut her off immediately. And none of it mattered because Rachel always needed to shine brighter. Rachel suddenly burst into tears. Real tears this time. Not strategic ones. Because for the first time in her life, the spotlight wasn't working. "You're humiliating me," she sobbed. I stared at her in disbelief. "Humiliating you?" Dad slammed his hand on the table. "Enough." Everyone jumped. He pointed at me angrily. "You owe this family." That sentence changed everything. Not because it shocked me. Because it confirmed my deepest fear. Their love had always been transactional. I was valuable now only because I had money. Nothing else. Not my intelligence. Not my resilience. Not my success. Just excess. I felt something inside me go completely cold. Rachel wiped her eyes dramatically. "I deserve some of that money," she whispered. And honestly, That almost impressed me. The entitlement was so enormous it circled back into absurdity. You deserve it? I asked. Yes, she snapped suddenly. You got lucky. Lucky. I built an international company from a folding table above a Chinese restaurant. Worked 18-hour days. Survived panic attacks. Took risks nobody supported. And somehow, that became luck. I looked around the table one final time. At the relatives avoiding eye contact. At my mother's anger. At my father's resentment. At Rachel's greed. And suddenly the exhaustion hit me all at once. 30 years of emotional starvation. 30 years of trying. 30 years of shrinking myself to fit inside a family that never intended to see me fully. I closed my laptop slowly. Then stood up. I'm done. Mom looked stunned. What does that mean? It means the monthly transfers stop tonight. Dad's face went white. Rachel actually gasped. Mom stepped toward me immediately. You can't do that. I can. You owe us. No, I said quietly. I don't. Rachel's voice turned sharp instantly. You selfish bitch. The entire room froze. And weirdly, I smiled. Because finally, the mask dropped completely. No pretending. No fake family warmth. No obligation disguised as love. Just truth. Raw, ugly truth. I picked up my coat calmly. My Hermes bag sat near the doorway. Mom had complimented it earlier, by the way. Called it a cute fake. I slipped it onto my shoulder. And as I walked toward the door, I heard something behind me that made me stop cold. Mom was already talking about my money. Not me. Not our relationship. The money. We could pay off the house, she whispered frantically to Dad. Rachel immediately added. And my MBA. I stood there staring at the front door while something inside me finally died completely. Not dramatically. Quietly. Like a candle going out. Then I walked away. Outside, cold air hit my face hard. I got into my car shaking violently. Not from fear. Adrenaline. Grief. Relief. I drove for nearly an hour before pulling over because I physically couldn't breathe properly. My phone exploded non-stop the entire drive. Calls. Texts. Voicemails. Notifications. I ignored all of them. At a red light, I glanced once at the family group chat. Big mistake. Rachel had already posted. Funny how money changes people. I laughed so hard I almost cried. Money didn't change me. Money revealed them. The harassment started immediately. My mother's messages evolved through emotional stages like some kind of psychological speedrun. Anger. Guilt. Manipulation. Begging. Threats. One text read. After everything we sacrificed for you. Sacrificed. The word made my hands shake with rage. What exactly had they sacrificed? Attention. Basic affection. College savings. My graduations. Meanwhile, Rachel launched herself fully into social media victimhood. Passive-aggressive Facebook posts. Instagram captions about toxic wealthy people. Cryptic tweets about betrayal. And the comments. God. People love drama when it's not their pain. Distant relatives started contacting me non-stop. Family friends. Cousins I hadn't seen in years. Random people offering opinions about morality and wealth. Apparently everyone becomes a philosopher when someone else has money. Then came Monday morning. And somehow, things got even worse. I arrived at my office building just after 8. Jenny met me downstairs looking deeply uncomfortable. Sarah. I immediately knew. My family's here, aren't they? She nodded slowly. Reception looked like a hostage negotiation. Mom. Dad. Rachel. Sitting together like angry customers waiting for management. Rachel stood immediately when she saw me. We need to talk. No, I replied calmly. You need to leave. Mom crossed her arms. We've discussed things as a family. Family. Interesting word suddenly. And we've decided, Dad added, that setting up trust would be the fairest solution. I stared at him. Actually stared. Because I genuinely couldn't process the audacity. Rachel jumped in immediately. I need at least 2 million to properly restart my life. Restart. My God. I looked at my sister carefully and realized something horrifying. She truly believed she deserved my success simply because we shared DNA. Not a single part of her saw me as human. I was infrastructure. A resource. An ATM with childhood memories attached. I set my bag down quietly. Then took out my phone. Mom frowned. What are you doing? I logged into my banking app. Opened the transfer account. And canceled every recurring payment. Right in front of them. Mom gasped dramatically. Rachel actually stepped forward. You can't punish us like this. Punish. Interesting choice of words. Dad's face hardened instantly. You're being cruel. Cruel. That one almost made me laugh. Because neglected children hear that word constantly the moment they stop sacrificing themselves for everyone else. I looked at all three of them calmly. For the first time in my life, I said softly, I'm choosing myself. Rachel's mask shattered completely. You think you're better than us now? No, I replied. I finally realized you never thought I mattered at all. That shut her up. For exactly 2 seconds. Then the screaming started. Mom crying. Dad yelling. Rachel accusing me of destroying the family. Employees throughout the office quietly pretended not to listen. Security eventually intervened. Watching my 60-year-old parents escorted out of my building while my sister screamed about greed felt surreal. Humiliating. Necessary. Final. After that, things escalated legally. New phone numbers. Fake emails. Attempts to contact me through business channels. One voicemail from Rachel lasted 6 straight minutes, alternating between sobbing and insulting me. Eventually my attorney stepped in. Formal cease and desist letters. Harassment warnings. Trespassing notices. And finally, silence. 6 months have passed now. I moved into a new home with better security. Changed my numbers. Expanded the company again. Ironically, several high-profile clients respected how discreetly I handled the family fallout. Apparently wealthy people really relate to inheritance drama. Rachel still posts passive-aggressive nonsense online occasionally. Last I heard, she wanted to start her own jewelry authentication business. Good luck with that. Mom and Dad tell relatives they never wanted my money anyway. Which would probably sound more convincing if they hadn't demanded trust funds in my office lobby. But honestly, None of that matters anymore. Because for the first time in my entire life, I feel free. No more shrinking myself. No more apologizing for success. No more funding people who confuse excess with love. And Grandma Marie. She's wonderful. She visited last month to help catalog a private collection. We spent the afternoon exactly the way we used to when I was little. Jewelry spread across the table. Tea steaming softly beside us. Sunlight through curtains. Safe. At one point she squeezed my hand gently and said, "You were never hard to love, Sarah." I had to leave the room for a minute after that. Because sometimes healing doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives as one sentence your inner child waited 30 years to hear. And before anyone asks. Yes. I'm still in therapy. Yes. Cutting them off hurt. More than I expected. But some doors only lead back into burning buildings. And eventually, you stop trying to rescue people determined to stand in the flames. Oh. And one last thing. Rachel. I know you still stalk my social media. That Cartier bracelet in your latest Instagram picture? Definitely fake. Just saying. You know what I've learned through all of this? Family isn't people who demand access to your success. Family is people who celebrate your existence before they know what you can give them. Sometimes revenge isn't destruction. Sometimes revenge is simply refusing to stay small for people who benefited from your silence. And honestly, that freedom is worth more than $12 million ever could be. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. And if this story hit you emotionally, make sure to subscribe because there are so many more unbelievable revenge stories coming soon. Also let me know in the comments. Would you have cut the family off completely, or given them another chance? I'll see you in the next story.